Our gospel reading for October the 6th, 2024 comes from Mark chapter 10, verses 2 through 16. Before continuing on, let me just apologize for the quality of the video last week. By the time I noticed that it was fuzzy and it become out of focus for a reason I still don't understand, I was too sick to record another. So I hope you will forgive me for that. Now let's get on to the gospel reading of Mark. I recently heard another preacher preach on this gospel. It seems like there's two lessons in this gospel. The first lesson deals with divorce. And then in verse 13 it says the people were bringing children to him in order that he might touch them. And the disciples spoke sternly to them, but Jesus said, "Let the children come to me. Don't stop them. Truly I tell you, who does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter into it." If the Gospels were simply a chronology of the way events occurred, a documentary, let's say, of somebody following Jesus around at that moment, recording everything, that would be one thing. But all of the Gospels that we have, the earliest writings occurred some 30 years after Jesus' death. You see, when Jesus ascended into heaven, he said he would come back. And since he was coming back, there was no reason to tell his story except to tell the good news that the Messiah had come and that he was returning. And then Jesus would explain his own actions and tell his own stories. In fact, why do you need Gospels if the person you're writing about is going to come and continue the story? It's only when the writers began to understand, as more and more of the apostles began to die, that Jesus coming back was not on our timetable, but on God's timetable. Therefore, they remembered what Jesus had said, but they put what Jesus said together in such a way as to address issues that the church was facing at the time. So whenever you see an aspect like this where it talks about divorce and then all of a sudden it seems to switch totally to a new topic, you have to stop and think, is it switching to a new topic? Or is Jesus giving a new perspective on an old topic? It begins with an issue of the law and righteousness by the law. And what we know from Jesus' teaching is that when Jesus talks about righteousness of the law, he goes way beyond what the Pharisees and the Sadducees understand. If you even look at a person with lust in your eyes, you've committed adultery. It's the intent before the action that has made you sin. And so we're dealing with the aspect of divorce, and Jesus says, well, because of your hardness of heart, he wrote this commandment for you. But no one should get divorced. This shouldn't happen. I mean, this is extreme holding to the law. And yet, Jesus is all about forgiveness. Even with the woman caught in adultery, and go and sin no more. Or the woman at the well, where he says, go and get your husband. And he says, yeah, the man you're with now is not your husband either. And yet, he's offering her living water. This seems to contradict one another. How could Jesus be so forgiving and yet come down on the law so harshly? And I think what's being brought out here in Mark is that if we try to obey the law, we are all condemned. Paul remarks in Romans, he was a loyal follower of the law. And yet the more he tried to follow the law, the more he fell short of following the law. I don't do the things I want to do. Things I want to do are the things that I don't do. Jesus, maybe there's a different way. What is it about? What is it about family that's so important? Is it the man and the woman? Or maybe that's why we have the second part, when the children come into the picture. Breaking up, being divorced, is difficult on everyone. It's occurred within my family systems. And it affects so many people. I refer to divorce as an amputation. When gangrene has set into the marriage, and both parties who are one will die as that gangrene spreads, you have no choice but amputation. And yet with that amputation, there's always a loss. That you will continue to have that phantom feeling from then on. People may divorce, but they're still entangled in the lives of the person they divorced from. And if the children are involved, it makes it even worse. And the children are torn between the two. And so while Jesus seems to not have any compassion for the adults as they're talking about divorce, all of his compassion is directed toward the little children. A lot of people will stay married for the children. There's a real good reason to show stability in that life. But if there's gangrene, it could even spread to the children and make their lives toxic as well. And so it's a choice between two options that are not good options, either one. To stay married and to fill your children with a sense of hate, anger, and frustration, and disappointment, and sickness that will infect their relationships for the rest of their lives? Or do you get divorced and have that pain of division? No good option. But Jesus refocuses from divorce onto children. What's best for the children? To come in to the kingdom of God as little children. To restore that innocence. To protect that innocence. To protect their faith and their hope and their love. The law condemns. The Spirit loves. What a contrast. When we start off debating some legal issue as if it has no ramifications to families. Like it's just some legal debate as to what is morally right and wrong. And then Jesus says, let the little children come to me. Because every decision we make has an effect on those around us. It's not simply a moral issue or an ethical issue or an issue of righteousness. It's a relational issue. Theology, talk about God, is not a head pursuit. It's a relational pursuit. We learn about God so that we can draw closer to God in heart and mind and body. so that we can have a more intimate relationship with God. We want to know more. Just as little children want to spend time with their parents. They want to be like them. They want to be with them. Things that go to courts and are decided logically on the points sometimes miss the little children. Let us follow the example of Jesus and not get caught up in legalism, but remember it's all about relationship.